you don't have to try. Your brain and your subconscious are so evolved and intricate that me as a person, as Alissa, can go in there with different expectations, and all you have to do is lie there and surrender. And I truly believe that your subconscious attends to its most pressing need once it finally has an opportunity to do that.
Ketamine Connections, welcome back. I'm Anna, and I'm super excited for today's episode because one of the topics that you guys are across the board asking for more information about is the topic of integration. It's a little bit of a mystery. What is integration and how to work with integration? And it's really my specialization. So we've talked about it a little bit in certain guest episodes. I've had other guests on to talk about different integration modalities. And in today's episode, I have the wonderful, amazing, lovely, passionate Alissa Bestwick, Float Girl official, and we are talking all things deprivation tanks and float tanks. If you have no idea what that is, don't worry about it. We get into that into the episode. We talk about what it is, how it feels, different nervous system and subconscious benefits of floating. Floating is a modality that I've been working with for a really long time, and extra special to have Alissa on the show because she's the one that introduced me to floating. We talk about that in the episode of how she really infused me with her enthusiasm for it and how it has stuck with me for so many years. Floating is also something that I recommend to a lot of clients. And so it is one of the best integration tools that is out there, in my opinion. Floating can spark creative breakthroughs. It is a way to really be alone with yourself in a way that is special and unique. And Alissa talks about that as well in the episode of her story of how floating dropped her into trauma that she was carrying around, that she had no idea that she was carrying around until she got into the float tank. And the thing that is really common in these situations is that when you finally get a moment to stop, right? Maybe you're sitting at a movie or you're sitting down to actually be present with your meal, and all of this emotion, all of these thoughts come up. And that is your subconscious mind saying, oh, good. You finally have a moment. Let me tell you the things that you're carrying around that you might not know that you're carrying around. It's really common to assume that something is wrong. And it's also really common to then get back on that hamster wheel so that you don't have to deal with it. But here's the thing. The body, the subconscious mind is always seeking homeostasis. It wants the absolute best for you. So it's always going to seek out equilibrium and really bring you into that balance that is its natural state. And there's so many different philosophies and schools of thought on well-being, both physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, all of that. So many different schools of thought out there. And the one that I prescribe to that I have noticed to be really true in my own experience and in the experience that I've observed of life is that if you don't take the time to deal with whatever your subconscious mind wants you to deal with, it's going to find other avenues. And that is when I have found myself sick. That's when I have found just myself kind of knocked out of my equilibrium, because sometimes when we are not listening to the soft sort of whispers of our intuition, then it's possible to get knocked out with a boulder, right? Or a giant rock. And the subconscious mind really is doing that in your best intention for your highest and greatest good. And there's ways to stay ahead of it so that that doesn't have to come to that extreme measure. And floating is one of those ways. Floating is a way to regulate your nervous system, get into your thoughts. It's a way to connect with yourself. Alissa gives so many great tips for that in this episode of how to work with the float tank, how to experiment with it. And something that I will say is that, I've been recommending floating to clients for years, and it is really common for clients to come back after their first float and say, wow, that really wasn't for me. And my other school of thought that I prescribe to is try everything twice. So try it once because it's your first time and there's an element of figuring it out and kind of getting to know whatever it is that you're doing, and try it twice to really have the second experience to know if it's really for you or really not for you. And that is the case with floating. Alissa talks really beautifully about how to come to floating with curiosity rather than fear, and how to approach your first float with a lot of gentleness and a lot of ease. I also really love the scope of conversation that we floated with here. This episode really felt like a float journey where we were floating between topics and covering so many different beautiful channels of modalities. We talked about dark rooms, we talked about floating, we talked about so many other things. And it's a really rich episode that I'm really excited to bring to you. And really quick, before we dive into the episode, if you are not already subscribed to my email list, please hop on there. I'll put the link in the show notes. And here's the thing, there's a lot of censorship on these apps. I've already spoken about getting kicked off of Instagram last year, and we just don't know what's going to happen. And my email newsletter has a lot of updates that are not a part of the podcast. They would be on social if we were there, but we're not at this moment. There's extra content on there. I'll put out videos. I'll put out other information. I'll put out times when you can just come and hang out with me on Zoom for free. And it's really the best way for us to stay in touch, because let me tell you, if I learned anything from getting kicked off of Instagram last year, there's no warning. It just kind of happens. And I know that this platform is really helping a lot of you. I get a lot of emails. I see the numbers growing, and I want you to have this information. It's so important and it's so valid, regardless of what censorship is saying. So hop on my email newsletter and let's get into this float tank integration episode with Alissa Bestwick, Float Girl Official. If you're listening to this show, I already know something about you. I know that you care about doing this work well. You're not just here for an experience, you are here for real, lasting change. So let me ask you, how are you ever going to get the transformation you want from ketamine if you aren't clear about what to expect? The only way to make sure that ketamine actually works for you is to get clear on how the mind works and how ketamine interacts with your brain, the rules of psychedelics use so you don't make the same mistake I did, and how to be prepared for anything. And yes, I mean anything. And those questions only get answered when you follow a solid preparation protocol. Unfortunately, most clinics don't offer this up. Maybe they refer you to a therapist, but most therapists don't understand subconscious work or psychedelic work. And with anxiety, ketamine can only do so much. However, I also have good news. That is exactly why I created the ketamine preparation protocol. It is a simple 3-step process to help you feel safe, supported, ready, and yes, able to trust the process so that your journey is powerful and life-changing, not left up to chance. Go ahead and visit the link in the show notes and get yourself prepared, whether you've already started ketamine or are going to soon. All right, back to the show. Ketamine Connections, Alissa Bestwick, Float Girl Official, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here with you.
Months in the making. I'm so excited. You're an often listener of the podcast, so you know how we start off, right? If you can go back and tell the you before you started all this anything, what would you say to her?
First of all, thank you for asking this question. And this is something that I've realized, we'll say within the last week, I would have told that girl, attract, don't chase. Keep it simple. Everything that is coming for you will come regardless of effort, regardless of perceived placement. I really, really thought for the longest time that me attempting to exert control over every aspect of my life was because I cared, but it was because of fear. And on the other side of it, having found floating without even trying, I think back to all of the best things that have happened in my life. And you could have asked me the day before if I was going to meet you, or if I was going to find floating, or if I was going to land a big job that I was excited about. I don't know that I could have anticipated. So I finally just let it go and let it flow.
Wow. It's so funny. I have a poster in my house that says, "I don't chase, I attract." And something in me flipped last night where I was like, I ignore it as I walk by it.
What does that mean?
I think it means what you're saying, right? Like our culture is so hustle culture. It's so like if I want it, I got to go get it. I got to make it happen and things like that. So why don't you tell us, just like for the listener hearing this going, this is so different than anything I know. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you found floating and sort of the backstory of this advice that you're giving?
Sure. It has been a long road. So learn from me and maybe truncate that for yourself by 20 years. I found floating a little bit of a backwards way. I had really embraced a fitness journey about 10 years ago. I was a new mom. If I'm being honest, I wasn't necessarily happy with my situation. I was honestly in a failing marriage, love my child, but just found myself in a difficult spot. And I was in my head so much that I thought, what can I do to get just into my body and out of my head? So I started working out. I started taking my nutrition very seriously and accidentally bioengineered a much healthier place for myself to be. But through that, I got really curious about different modalities for athletic recovery. And on the surface, flotation therapy is great for your body. You're soaking in Epsom salt, which everybody says, oh, you can do that at home, but it's so good for muscle recovery and relaxation that I had been reading up on it. And straight moment of honesty and vulnerability. After my marriage failed, I was out on the dating apps and I ran into this guy. I thought he looked somewhat familiar in the context of, oh, this is a friend of a friend. This feels safe enough to chat with him and get to know him a little bit. And when we connected over coffee and vegan ice cream, I said, oh, what do you do? And he goes, oh, I run a float center. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I have heard about that. Sensory deprivation. What is all of that about? And as he told me his story, I realized that I had met him before and he had been legitimately a completely different person. I had a very corporate banking job straight out of college, and he had been a manager on the floor. He even went by a different name. I would not, if I wasn't trying to be perceptive, I would not have even recognized him to be the same person. And through talking to him, he had gone on a vision quest out west. He was feeling unfulfilled and he found floating, and it completely transformed his life, his purpose, even the way he looked. At this point, he was just I love personal evolution and seeing people so comfortable in their skin. And I was lucky enough to have seen him on both sides of it. His hair was different. He was covered in these gorgeous fractal tattoos. There was just a piece about him in having found something so meaningful that it was very transformative. And I just really was attracted to this idea of, wow, we all have such incredible potential just waiting under the surface. What's going to activate it? So, of course, seeing his personal transformation and also suddenly having access to a float spa, I said, heck yeah, I want to try that. I want to do that for myself. I want to feel the most me I can possibly feel. And then while I was floating, I was like, okay, you're in the tank and you think this is really fun. I'm really open to this. But what I noticed once I started integrating it into my life is that I had almost a hole in my subconscious that had been draining energy. I don't know if you have any experience with that. I don't do as much subconscious work, or I didn't at the time. I barely knew any of that part of myself existed. But suddenly something was healing in me, and I only clocked it after it didn't feel so bad. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've been carrying this around. Again, trauma from my failed marriage. It was seeping out into my dreams. I would wake up scared, hurt, mad. And then after floating, which was 5 years after my relationship had been over. I thought on the surface, I'm over that. I'm so over that. That was 5 years ago. I don't think about this guy. I wish him well, whatever. But to wake up and have this deep peace and comfort, suddenly I just had more energy. I just wasn't drained anymore. And pretty much the one thing that I had done to change up my routine was floating. And I thought to myself, if I can send this message to at least one other person that didn't know that it was available and it might work for somebody else, oh my goodness, that would be so fulfilling. And it took on this life of its own and felt like a mission that I want people to feel this good. And if floating can be one aspect that does that for them, I have to try.
I love this story so much. It never gets old for me because we've known each other for so long that I remember this time in your life when you found floating, and I remember you coming to me and telling me about floating. You actually took me to my first float. You then I caught your bug because you are so passionate about it, and I caught your bug and I was visiting you and I was like, yeah, you were like, do you want to go float? And I was like, how do you say no to that level of enthusiasm? Like, of course, let's go. And so we'll talk about I remember that time in your life when you were talking about floating. It's actually reminiscent to, working in the ketamine space. A lot of people come back from their first ketamine journey and talk about ketamine the way that you're talking about your first float, where you got access to a part of you that you don't, consciously in your everyday life have access to. And it revealed something to you that you didn't know was hiding underneath the surface, which is that you were still carrying so much trauma and just baggage from, from the relationship, from the failed marriage, and also just how it ended, right? There wasn't much closure there at that time and things like that. And so, the way you talk about floating is how people talk about ketamine. And also, we were talking about this before we hit record of, floating is a therapy that was invented to be psychedelic, right? It was made for that. So there's 100 things that I want to talk about right now. But the first thing that I want to talk about, because I'm going to just assume that our listeners don't know anything about floating. And you talked about, the concentrated Epsom salt. So I want to talk a little bit because there's different kinds of float tanks. And I know you know that. But they all have the concentrated salt in common. So why don't you, before we touch on 100 of the things that you said, why don't you just give us the basic overview of just okay, I've never been to a float spa. I walk into a center. What do I expect? Just take us through the bare bones.
Sure. So floating is synonymous with sensory deprivation. And so you'll hear both terms essentially used simultaneously. And in the 50s, John Lilly was a neuroscientist and a psychoanalyst, and he thought to himself, what happens when we don't give the brain stimuli? Are we just such perceptive creatures that if I were to, oversimplification, but if I turn off the lights and I turn down the sound and I sit myself in a chamber that is just so quiet and dark, does my brain turn off? Is that what I am? Am I all of my stimuli? And the answer is a resounding no. And so the different iterations of a float tank have just been refinements to try to get to a truly unbothered state. And so, yes, like you touched on, you would go into a float spa right now and you would find yourself in a room. I liken it to a shower stall because at this point, they're not super confined. Some people are very triggered by the perception of closed spaces, and it's a turnoff in the industry. So they've really found a way to make them spacious inside so you don't feel claustrophobic. But the elements there are, it's about 10 inches of warm water, not hot water. It's very comfortable. The point is that your skin does not perceive of it. So it's about skin temperature water, hypersaturated with 1,000 pounds of medical clean magnesium sulfate, which means you just can't sink. You're hanging out in the Dead Sea. And it closes around you either with a door, or if you're in a pod, it's a lid. But again, it's very vaulted. I've been in there and you don't feel cramped. So it's just super quiet and all of the lights are off. And there are sort of different customizations that you can take. Some of them have beautiful twinkle lights, so you feel like you're outside. Or if you really are into a particular light therapy, you can turn on a particular color light. Some really beautiful ones also can pump in sound. If you're not looking for the completely quiet experience, you can play your favorite meditation, guided meditation, or singing bowls are really lovely in a float tank because the pulses of the notes float through the water and just wash against your skin in waves. So there's so many beautiful customizations at this point that you can do it. But that's what it is at the heart, is sitting in a dark, silent, gentle, warm pool of water where nothing is expected of you.
Which for so many people, then it's like that's when the stuff comes out, right? It's like you all of a sudden are like taking that moment, and then people have an uptick in thinking, in feeling, in anxiety, whatever it is, because and they're like, oh, I don't like that because it makes me anxious. It's like, no, you're actually walking around anxious. And the second you give your body and your mind a moment to chill out, that's when it's like, hey, here's all the things you're not feeling because you're busy running around.
Absolutely. Yes. It's like a deep meditation. And the surprising thing is, you don't have to try. Your brain and your subconscious are so evolved and intricate that me as a person, as Alissa, can go in there with different expectations. And all you have to do is lie there and surrender. And I truly believe that your subconscious attends to its most pressing need once it finally has an opportunity to do that.
Amen. And that's a good thing to know, just like really quick, like about the logistics, because there are the ones that are like a shower stall, and those are really spacious. And then there are the ones that are like a clamshell that are more confined. And so it's just good for the listener to know of like, hey, if you're like shopping around, like most urban centers, I would say have at least two float spas. And so it's like if you know yourself to be someone who's a little bit more claustrophobic, more aversive to confined spaces, like call around and ask and be like, hey, what is the offering at this place? And then also know, like, if you're not claustrophobic, know that you can try different types and like have a preference. Like I used to hate the clamshells because I was just like, it did feel like a coffin to me. But then now, since being in more spacious ones, I'm like, oh, I kind of like the little cave that I crawl into with the clamshell. So, but it's by trying all of them that you're able to have a preference.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like finding the perfect yoga studio for you. Yes, there are different offerings as long as it's clean, which is obviously a bare minimum. I would read reviews, speak to somebody that's actually gone there. Hey, check with me. I make it kind of a point to travel around the country, and that's what I base some of my travels on is, hey, what kind of float spas do you have around here? Let me go check it out. So I love delving into that. But you're absolutely right. It's a matter of just seeing what really resonates with you. And there's different kinds. The people that own float spas, I can say for sure are not in it for the money. It's a high overhead. It's a big labor of love. So typically, the person that owns the center, as long as they are skilled, they are like your integration specialist. It is not, the service itself is not relegated to the amount of time that you're in the tank. You go in and a good place will welcome you in, breathe with you, allow you to arrive, shake off some of the outside world that you have brought in, and then welcome you back like a high-end spa guest, deliver you safely to your pod. You have your journey, and then actually you come out, and I really recommend that you give yourself at least an hour on the back end to fully integrate, maybe journal, sit there with your thoughts. They typically have a really beautiful lounge that you can just exist in. But absolutely, there's different preferences that you'll find out on your own what you really love.
Yeah, and I do love that too because like my favorite places do have like a little room that is like a landing room, which a lot of ketamine clinics have. Like a lot of ketamine clinics will have like the service, like the treatment room, and then they either leave clients in the treatment room to land after the journey, or they have a landing room that is very reminiscent. Like it's a dark space, usually like a warm beverage, like a warm non-caffeinated tea, and just like space to like sit on a couch, be comfortable, like pillows, blankets, and things like that, which is actually really reminiscent of float spas as well.
And it's so nice to see the crossover. And obviously, you're in a very unique position where you can speak wholeheartedly to both practices. But that's the one thing that I can say about float is it obviously doesn't exist in a vacuum. You can do it every day and be perfectly happy. But when I've found my most optimized is when I've paired that with a deep yoga practice, with meditation. So if you're saying that there's a good way to tie ketamine with floating in an everyday or a weekly practice, I believe you.
Well, yeah, it's one of my favorite integration tools, and that's kind of how this episode and this collaboration on this episode is born. Is that I've had a lot of like listeners reach out and they're want to know more about integration because everyone the psychedelic community is starting to really pick up the importance of integration. We're starting to understand that it's not just about the ceremony, but it's really about the preparation. The ceremony is a part of the complete transformation, and then it's the after, right? And so there's different tools for integration, and I've been recommending float tanks, deprivation tanks, whatever you want to call them, salt chambers. Like I've been recommending them to clients for years. And most people doing ketamine, it's usually like one, maybe two sessions a week. And so sometimes people don't have the luxury to take off of work for a whole week. It's like sometimes people don't even have the luxury to take off of work that day. Like they might finish their work day, go to their ketamine treatment, and then go back to work the next day. It's not my highest recommendation, but if that's all you can do, that's all you can do. But then if you pair that, like say the next day or a couple of days later, or that weekend, you take an hour, because most floats are an hour. You could do 90 minutes. I think I've seen 2 hours, which to me is just like good for you, not for me. But it's, yeah, like just go and just like you were saying, right? Like cut off the input. We have so much input into our subconscious mind, not just from the media and advertising and things in the outside world. Our own brain we think about 70,000 thoughts a day, right? To just like go in and just be like, okay, let me just be with myself and notice whatever there is to notice.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that. And that's what I want to impart on your listeners is please don't mistake when I say that it's dark and quiet, that it's boring. You will provide your own show. I don't know if you've ever sat in the complete dark, but I have taken friends. It is a particular pleasure of mine to introduce people to floating. And of course, I'm always like, yeah, I want to come too. And the feedback that I've gotten is, oh my goodness, it's like watching a movie that my brain projects. I stare into the top of the tank, and even though it's this endless dark, I had something that I needed to work through, and my brain just blasted that on the ceiling. I watched it as if I was a casual observer. So if that's what you need to work on, your brain knows that, your subconscious knows that. You don't even have to know, and you'll find out. I agree with you that 60 to 90 minutes is ideal. Especially in the beginning, if you're unpracticed, it does take a little time to drop in just because the novelty is interesting. Some people go into it with fear. Am I going to do this right? They put a lot of pressure on themselves. And it takes a moment to settle in. I would say at most 15 minutes. And the places are always so gracious that they say, if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, step back out into your room. You're in a private suite. You can come out if you want. I would encourage people to get over that hump of initial curiosity and possible discomfort, because on the other side of that is just a deep, restful relaxation. But you're absolutely right. Around the 90-minute mark, you're like, okay, that was great. I'll be back. I'll be back in a couple of days. I'll be back next week. I'm ready to get out. I'm feeling really good about this experience.
Yeah, and it's such a gift to give to yourself, to get to know yourself in that way, right? Like you don't know where your mind goes, what your subconscious mind wants to impart on you or anything like that. You have no idea until you do that, until you lock yourself in a room doing this weird thing, floating in 10 inches of highly concentrated salt water, like you're floating in the Dead Sea with, just like this curiosity of like, what what does my mind have to tell me today? And like you said, right, it's like getting over getting over all of the obstacles of like most people, I think they go through that with ketamine too, of like, okay, this is weird, this is what is it called, like non-traditional, this is a thing that I don't know how it's going to turn out. And so it's like, if people are doing ketamine, they're already in that place of like doing weird things. Like, just add this to the list.
And I think it comes off as weird just because people don't necessarily talk about it as much. That's really the birthplace of the blog was, oh, if you knew what was going on, you would definitely try it. But for me, I think water is so universal, right? It's natal. That's really kind of what it feels like in there. I walk back some of my childhood memories. I think about this incredible time that I went skinny dipping in the ocean under a full moon. And then that walks back to, oh, when I was little and I was learning how to swim in the pool, and I would look down far down at the bottom and think, wow, this is the closest that I'll ever get to flying. And then who knows? I wish I could remember what it was like in the womb, but a part of you remembers, and it feels so safe and comfortable. When you get in there, it's not foreign. It's probably the most natural thing.
I am gonna cry. That was so beautiful. Yeah, it's not for it's the fact that you explained it that way shows how foreign our modern lifestyle is. That we think getting into water and relaxing is weird and foreign. That's where we
Wow.
come from.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, I'm like getting a little emotional over here. So I'm like, where do we go from there? Okay, I wrote it down. Um, I think there is this really interesting intersection. You talked about it earlier when you were talking about your journey into floating, how it started from, you didn't say this, but I'm going to say it, almost a biohacking lens, right? You were doing like workouts. You do really intense workouts. Like you've been doing CrossFit. Like I've known you for a long time, and I know how strong you are. I've seen you like climb a rope like it's no thing. Like catapult yourself into, like, you're so parkour. Like when I think of you, I think about parkour, and I love that about you. I love your athleticism, and there is this interesting bridge where ketamine and floating has this like multiple populations coming to it, right? It's got the people that are in hard times, working through stuff. And then it also has people that are coming at it from like a optimization, biohacking. And so what are some of the benefits? I mean, we've talked about the subconscious benefits of like tuning out the input, connecting with your subconscious mind, letting whatever needs to come up, come up. We haven't talked about the benefit of salt, right? So as emotions come up, the salt actually sucks that out. But tell us some of the benefits of floating, just for someone listening.
Yes. And the great thing about it is no matter why you go into it, you get the benefit of all of it, no matter what you're expecting. So that's great. Soaking in the Epsom salts, again, is just so restorative for muscle recovery. So if you truly are just an athlete looking for a great recovery regimen, it fits in really beautifully with sauna, cold plunge, float. Is just this knockout trio of I'm going to feel really great the next day to do my workout again. It actually releases endorphins to sit there in the water, which promotes a very restful night's sleep. People will say, kind of like your nervous system reset yoga class, you will have the best sleep that you can remember in a long time. And it just converts into your body into this beautiful cocktail of happy chemicals. And then I have heard that people who suffer from chronic pain, very luckily for me, that's not something that I experience, but it reduces inflammation. So if you are constantly walking around with pain in a certain part of your area from an old injury, it helps reduce that immensely from what I've heard. I have heard that people go into the float tank to amplify manifestation, which is really wonderful. One of my good friends, you get to meet such interesting characters in this journey. And one of the most beautiful float spas that I have ever seen was a vision of a man that built it in his mind from in the float tank. He said, I'm going to blast my insides out into this world. This is what I have to share. He's a beautiful mix of an artist and an engineer and a visionary. And he said, I'm going to build this float tank just based on pulling everything out of myself. This will be my gift back to the world. And man, he really did it. So things like that are really beneficial. I have met somebody that is a filmmaker and was experiencing both physical pain, backs, aches and creaks, things like that. But he was also suffering from immense writer's block and went into floating and came out. And I did a feature on him and I really went up there. He owns a float spa now because he is so sold on the idea, but he does screenwriting classes for budding screenwriters outside of it. And I really went up there, I thought we were going to talk about his float spa, but he weaved such a beautiful story for me in the beginning about this movie that he decided to create outside of the float tank, that's what the article became, was him as a storyteller. And in that same vein, I have met artists that create optimally post float. So painters, but also musicians. So it's incredible for creativity and unlocking blocks.
Which links back to what you were saying in the beginning when you would go back and tell the UB, or you started all of this of just like stop chasing the answer and let it come to you, right? That's what you're talking about. It's like, I actually had this experience yesterday. We're releasing the ketamine preparation protocol this week, and we had a tech issue that I was just like, I'm not the tech person. And I was just like, I was asking everyone, I was like, well, how do we fix this? How do we fix this? And then I was just like, well, they'll get the answers, right? And then I go and I take a bath, and within 5 minutes in the bathtub, I'm like, guys, I got it. This is what we're going to do. And so it's just like, I think our society, I hope, I mean, in the circles that I run in, it's becoming more common to talk about like taking time away from your problem to let the solution come to you. But it's, whether it's you're seeking the answer to a problem, you're seeking clarity, right? That's probably why it's so good for manifestation. Or if you're, just working on a creative project, it's when you shut your mind off, that's when the inspiration, right? Inspiration, it comes from, right, to inspire, to breathe in. And so it's like, if you're chasing something and you got these like blinders, tunnel vision on, you're not creating space for that, inspiration or that impulse to come into you.
I was today years old when I found out the root of inspire. Thank you so much for that. That's so cool. Yeah, I know you've been very attuned to your own personal wellness journey for a long time. And so I stopped to take stock of what are the elements of my day that can equate to the best chance of me having a good day. And I boiled it down to a good night's sleep, obviously, good diet and supplementation. But I need to, as important as my workouts are, as important as these opportunities for movements, I have to schedule my stillness or it just doesn't come together. So whether that looks like yoga, whether that looks like meditation, or whether that looks like float, you're absolutely right. I feel like the best inspiration comes in the pause.
Absolutely. And I love it too. I've seen, I've been practicing yoga for a long time. Every so often I'll see someone in a yoga class with like a notepad and paper next to their mat. And every time I see it, I'm like, oh, I should do that, because I get such brilliant ideas, but they just kind of fly away with the practice, with the breath, and are, I mean, who knows, maybe they come back. But the reason inspiration is inspires because I think it comes from like ancient Greek, and in those ancient traditions, ideas are actually alive. So what happens is we breathe in the idea, and the idea comes to the person that the idea thinks is gonna, like, kind of like the child. Like if you believe in a soul, right? The soul of a child comes to the exact right parent that is going to give that soul the exact right experience. And so it's like the idea is like, oh, I'm going to go to that person and like I'll like be breathed in, and that person will bring me to life. So it's interesting to think of it in that way. It was around again, I have a master's degree in literature. So there was a change around the 1800s with romantic literature, where the artists started taking the art personally, saying like, oh, I'm the artist and this is my idea, and got very egoic. And we're still not quite recovered from that but before that, like if you look at Renaissance art, if you look at anything before like the 1800s, it was like, oh, I'm a shepherd of this idea. This idea wants to be born through me. It has nothing, like, I mean, you have a beautiful child, right? Like you're so good at mothering your child and like not taking it personally that it's not like, oh, this is mine. It's just like, you've said it for, I mean, I've heard you say this for years since she was so little, of just like, how can I usher her, right? Like, how can I help her grow into who she's supposed to be, rather than like, it needs to be this way, which is also an art.
Absolutely. The first thing that popped up in my mind as you were speaking about that is it'll be so interesting now that we're at this AI revolution, right? Is, the gathering up and the shepherding of these ideas and the fostering of these ideas. And now to see certain things be produced and art being produced by the robot overlords, which sometimes I really welcome them in. I don't know. I think I'm ready. I'm ready for that relationship. And also, you're right. It's almost like as humans, we can perceive of that which is raised up organically and maybe something that feels a little bit disconnected, like it's following a formula.
It's interesting. My favorite meme about AI is like a future where the robots are creating poetry and I'm like slaving away at a job is not the utopia I thought we were going to get into.
Right. It's like I thought they were going to do the dishes so that I could write and not work, kind of thing. Yeah,
No,
I feel
right.
that.
The Jetsons is like, right? Like Rosie the robot, she was doing the household stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We're going to keep trying.
We're working on it.
It's just the
And
beginning.
they can also clean up the ocean and like fix global, climate change and do all sorts of magic for us.
We'll keep them busy. Yeah.
Well, we got this. Yeah. So what would you tell, going back to floating, you said this earlier, right? It's like if you get into the float tank and you're uncomfortable, just push through those first 15 minutes, right? And acknowledging that for someone, I don't know if the listener listening to this right now has ever tried to meditate. I remember when I first started trying meditate, I would set a timer for 5 minutes and I'd be like, oh my God, it's been an hour. And I would look at the clock and it had been a minute, So it's just acknowledging that those first 15 minutes could be so excruciating for someone who is, experiencing discomfort or anything like that. What are some tips that you could offer them to get over that?
I would certainly urge them to extend themselves some grace. It does sound excruciating on this side of it, and yet get in there and play. Have you ever felt yourself in a bathtub with a bunch of salt? It's a different texture. It glides over your skin in such a delicious way. I get in there. Nobody said you have to be still. I do breath work. I do some stretches to really just land. It's almost like the beginning of a yoga class. You can do a little dance if you want to. You could feel your skin. I like to play with my hair and pretend that I'm a mermaid. Your hair's billowing behind you. Yes. Yeah. And you can show up that morning prepared to accept this practice. And what I mean by that is maybe don't drink a bunch of coffee before you go. Maybe just sideline your morning coffee ritual until afterwards. Or if you know that is not accessible to you, go in the afternoon. Like, go at a time where you just don't feel rushed. Don't fill your stomach. Go pee before you go in. Like, make it easy for yourself. Just be ready to settle in like you're going to go take a comfy nap on a couch, And if you fall asleep, let yourself fall asleep. It's going to be an amazing nap. You're not going to sink. You're not going to drown. Yeah. So like you said, just whatever your practice is for releasing expectations, and then just allow yourself to be as silly as you need to be until you're ready to be still.
That's such good advice. One of my favorite float sessions. So I used to have a membership where I had unlimited floats every month. Yeah. And I got into the practice of just going in there. I don't know if this is like a best practice, but I would just go in there for like 20 to like 40 minutes. Like I wouldn't do the full hour because I would go in there to listen to a meditation or to like, I would just go in there to receive like all of the physical benefits of the float that you mentioned, right? Like muscle recovery, detoxification. I do have chronic pain. So it like really helped me with those symptoms. So I would just go in there. And one of my favorite floats was boinking around the float tank. Like I would like push off my feet and then like bump my head. You're not going fast and it's not like dangerous. Like you said, you literally cannot sink. So I would just like, I would like boink and then like bounce back. And I just like did that for uh, who knows how long, because time really disappears in there. And I was just like boing, 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 just like moving around the
So
tank.
funny. And you can talk to yourself, just because you're going in there with no additional sound doesn't mean you can't entertain yourself until you feel like you're ready. It's so funny that you were saying about your practitioner that takes notes during yoga. I always thought it would be so fun to maybe take a recorder in there at some point and just be like, I have a great idea. I'm not getting out and I'm super naked right now, but I have this amazing idea. Don't forget for me, okay? I'm just like, yeah.
I sometimes when I get those ideas, like I'll say a little prayer of just like, hey, someone out there, remind me of this idea when I have my phone or like a pen and paper with me. Please come back to me in like 2 hours. I got you.
Right?
In 2 hours, I got you.
Right back, girl. I'll see you in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. So you actually taught me something in sort of the lowdown of what to talk about, just talking points for the show, about using float therapy in conjunction with psychedelics. So you were saying there's maybe talk in the float community of like someone doing like a psilocybin journey or maybe even a ketamine. You can't be with an IV, but like maybe doing like a psychedelic journey in the float tank. Is that what you were referring to?
Let's talk about that. And so, as much as floating feels like a woo-woo thing, there is a lot of people, really intelligent scientists that are putting a lot of time and effort into studying measurable effects of floating. So there is the Laureate Institute of Brain Research in Tulsa. Close enough for me to go visit. I feel like maybe I'll go check that out. There's also a float conference that happens every year that's a bunch of people just like me, people that own float centers, and they come together and they have scientific talks. There's some great research being done where the individual centers are being co-opted since they're already set up to do trials. They are given strict parameters and people go in and they can measure the effects of it. There is a lot of research being done. And one of the visions for potentially the near future is if psychedelics are going to be used in like a scientific, legal, meaningful way for integration for people that know that these things already work, what better venue than a float spa that is safe and clean and just already feels like essentially a spiritual container to lovingly deposit your body in for this experience, knowing that you are fully held, fully protected. Again, you have sort of this movie screen above you to have your experience in a meaningful way. That, yes, that is something that's being talked about, is how can we integrate this medicine with this existing practice for a really optimal experience for the practitioner.
It's definitely not a beginner practice because here's what I'm thinking is in the psychedelic space, the sort of like the PC term, like the jargon that we use for when you mix different psychedelics and you put them together, it's called stacking, right? And so some people will stack, different substances. We talk mostly about ketamine on this podcast, as you know, but ketamine does connect you to other psychedelics or at least builds the interest for it. So why not talk about it? And so because float deprivation therapy is already psychedelic, mixing a psychedelic with that psychedelic, I'm here for it. I'm like, sign me up. Like I would totally be in that trial because I have I'm well seasoned with psychedelics. I'm really comfortable in the float tank. I'm not afraid that I'm gonna like sink or like turn over or do something weird, but that is because I am more just seasoned with different types of psychedelics, whether it's with substances or without. But that would be so epic, right? To like, because there's this entire body relaxation. I feel like we haven't talked about that, right? Between the salt, between the water, between the darkness, between the silence, there is this like relaxation that takes over the entire body. And we have, right, we talk about this on the show all the time. Your issues are in your tissues. The body keeps the score. And you are everyone, myself included. I just came from physical therapy and he was massaging my thumb and my low back relaxed. I didn't know I was tight there. You know, it's like the fascial system is connective tissue that is connecting all the tissue in the body. And so when you have that full body relaxation and you're relaxing parts of you that you don't even know you're tensing, the things that could come out of it are, you have no idea.
Absolutely right. It's a portal to go deeper that, yes, in everyday life, you just actually wouldn't have access to, even if you tried. So what are your initial thoughts besides, I guess, like you said, you can't take an IV in. Do you think that ketamine eventually could be paired with floating? You just know more about it than I do.
You could do a lozenge or you could do like an IM. There's other ways of administering beyond IV. So you totally could mix them. It's just a matter like my brain always goes to safety, right? Like I know you can't sink in the water, but there's always going to be that person that like turns over and now is face down. Or, you know, with Matthew Perry, people think that he died from ketamine. He died from drowning. So while he wasn't even on ketamine at the time, he just had it in his system. He had high levels of toxicity. But yeah, like that would be my main thing. But I guess it's like a lot of ketamine clinics have cameras on the client. So if someone's not in the room with the client, a lot of ketamine clinics have cameras to monitor the client. So it could just be a matter. I guess there's privacy issues there with like you are butt ass naked. So maybe some people don't want to have that. I mean, listen, I'm a full sign me up, like, let's go, like, serve me psychedelics in the float tank. So if there's at least one of me and there's a whole industry of people talking about it, it's not for everyone, but I think there's incredible healing potential there.
And we've gotten to a place in both of our fields with ketamine research, with flotation therapy. We didn't get here until someone decided to push the boundaries and figure out what was possible. So I'll stand with you. Let's do some research. Let's figure it out. There's a float conference every year. I think I had mentioned that. And a couple of years back, one of the gentlemen was conducting his own research, and it was basically, does 4 hours in a float tank elicit lucid dreaming? How long do you want to sit in there until your brain just goes into essentially outer space? So, of course, I signed up for that immediately. Spoiler alert, 4 hours was not enough time for me to start lucid dreaming, but it was a cool experience to see how long I could go without experiencing like a deep discomfort that pulled me out of the tank. So that's probably the longest I've been in there. But yeah, let's try it.
Are you saying you did a float for 4 hours?
4 hours. Yeah. It was very regimented. It was very scientific. There was a protocol that you had to follow to get yourself prepared. And then he sat you down for a pre and post interview to see physiologically what it was doing to your body, what it was doing to your brain. And I love that stuff. Let's set up a study with people that are a tiny bit smarter than me, and we'll put it together.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about earlier too when you were talking is have you heard of dark room retreats?
No, tell me.
So it's exactly what it sounds like, and we won't get too far into it because it's not the point of this episode. But they've become really popular in the past, I don't know, like 3-ish years. Well, that's when I heard about it first, but they've been around for ages. Where they're really big in like the Pacific Northwest because it's so dark there already. It's basically you sign up to get locked in a room for, I think your starter pack is like 3 days. And you're in complete darkness for 3 days. And what happens is, so our pineal gland has androgenous DMT, which is another form of psychedelic. And so our pineal gland, it's in charge of, like, it produces serotonin to wake us up, right? When we see light in the morning, that's like the body signal of like, okay, it's time to wake up. Same thing. We've messed it up a little bit with electricity, but if you think about before we had electricity, it's dark out, you're like, okay, my day is done. There's nothing to do here, right? And again, we used to observe lunar cycles a lot more because you could do a lot more during a full moon than a new moon. Anyways, I'm getting in the weeds. So yeah, our brain, our like, ancient device here that is so advanced is like, when it's dark, it's time to go to sleep. When it's light, it's time to wake up. Now, if you're in a dark room for that long, and you block the production of the serotonin, of the wake up chemical, you start overproducing, like the melatonin somehow goes to DMT, and it's very psychedelic. It's very transformative. I've been wanting to do one for like a year. I just haven't gotten to a place in the world where I can do that. But I would be curious of like the overlap of that, right? It sounds like this person was trying to do something like that, but in a float tank.
Right. Yeah. In a very persistent state. That's so interesting. I'm going to look into that as well. What came up for me when you started saying that 20 years ago when we went on study abroad and we were in such a high longitude that we experienced white nights, which is kind of the opposite of that, right? So the whole idea is that the sun doesn't sink low enough in the horizon to darken the sky. And I distinctly recall that being very disruptive to my system, because you're absolutely right. When it's light out at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it has been all day, your brain is still like, no, we go, because that's what the sun tells us to do. We go. So, oh, wow, that sounds really cool to just exist in the dark. So, yeah.
When I first heard about that, it's like most of the things that I eventually do, when I first hear about them, I'm just like, I absolutely not. And as soon as I have that thought, and I'm like, damn it, that means one day I'm going to.
Right.
We've covered so much ground. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with before we call it a day?
I just think people know if it's within their heart to go. And all I'm saying is, don't make a decision based on fear. If you don't want to go because you're a little bit uncomfortable about it, it's okay to feel that. And then you just push through it. So give it a try. I think everybody should try it once. As far as really practical advice about what should I do the morning of, there's little things that you wouldn't necessarily know. You probably shouldn't shave that morning. Don't get the water in your eye. It's corrosive. Feel free to check out the blog. I very intentionally set it up specifically for questions. There's no question too silly. It's just these little things that you could practically follow to give yourself the best experience. So check that out to demystify it. I'm always available for questions. I love talking about floating. So yeah, I would just say if you feel that tug in your heart, literally check it out once. I don't think you have anything to lose. And if you've found a new practice out of it, I'm just so happy for you.
Amen. And I would amend that to say, try it twice. Because
Yeah.
the first, that's the person I am. I'm like, I'll try anything twice. Because the first time you're just trying it. Then the second time you have a little bit of experience and maybe can move through it differently. So I will amend it to try it twice. But we'll definitely link the blog in the show notes so people can know where to find you, so that if they can ask you questions and just see the labor of love that you've put out in the world with the Float Girl blog.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was something that came to me, that was returned to me with floating, as well as a love for writing. And I feel myself being healed every time that I'm able to actively share that skill again. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for all of your wealth of knowledge. Like I said, we'll link all of the links so people know where to find even more information if this is hitting their intuitive knowing of like, oh, there might be something there for me. And I would say too, for the listener that's like me, when they hear something and they're like, absolutely not, it's like, there's probably something there for you. It's the people that are just like completely apathetic, where it's just like, okay, maybe this isn't your thing.
Okay. This isn't for them. That's okay.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alissa, for being on the show. It has been a pleasure and a delight, and I'm just so grateful.
Thanks.
Mwah. Thank you so much for tuning into Ketamine Connections with me today. If this episode supported you, the best way to say thank you is by sharing it or leaving a review. And if you're enjoying the show and you want to connect more, I would love to see you on my newsletter. That is where I share behind the scenes insights, thoughtful guidance, and other parts of your ketamine journey. Never spam, always fun. And honestly, since getting kicked off of social media in 2024, it's where I share the real stuff. I share stories, tools, updates that I don't post anywhere else. So sign up at any of the links in the show notes and you'll be the first to know when I'm hosting live Q&A or when I'm doing other fun things that are not available anywhere else. It's the best place to hear about it, stay connected, and grow together. All right, that is all I have for today. Thank you. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.